Hi, everybody. I'm Erika Andersen, founder of Proteus International and author of the new book, Change from the Inside Out, Making You, Your Team, and Your Organization Change Capable. And the best advice I've ever gotten is get curious.
Ooh, get curious. I bet that served you well as a leader, huh? So when did you learn that advice, Erica?
I learned it from my dad. My dad was the single most curious person I've ever known. And it was wonderful having that as an example growing up. And then it has served me well, not only in my career, but in every book I've written. I was just reflecting on this. This is, as you know, this is my fifth book. And every book has been me getting curious, has been how wanting to kind of crack a code and find some simplicity at the heart of a complex topic, like what's really going on here. So I think it's served me astonishingly well.
Wow. Yeah, for sure. For sure. Well, that's interesting because yeah, this book I was curious about because change is a big thing. I mean, the last 2 years for me has honestly been nothing but change. And I think they've been pretty successful, but a lot of times they're not successful. And I really like why you talk about that and why you that's really the premise for why you even published this and why you did this. So talk to us about why most change initiatives fail.
I love that question, and that you're right, Phil. That is exactly why, because there's statistics that everybody quotes all the time. 70% of change initiatives fail. And all those statistics, they focus, I think rightly, on that the reason for most of that failure is human beings, is they call it lack of management support and employee buy-in. And so I really wanted to get down to what happens when an individual human being changes or doesn't. How do we actually make change as individuals? And so what I came to, which I'm very excited about, two things. The first one is there's something called homeostasis, and I think most of us know that word. It's wanting to come back to stability, and how it works in the world is wanting to come back to the known. So, and for most of our history as human beings, that's really served us because change in the past was generally dangerous. It's like if there's a famine, you want to come back to eating regularly. If there's a war, you want to come back to peace and prosperity. So we learned that the safest thing to do is just come back to the known, right? And now the world we live in, especially the last couple of years, it's not even possible to do that. And it's now not generally the safest choice. The safest choice is to move ahead, right? So what that means is we need to rewire ourselves. We have this ancient predisposition for the known, and we need to rewire ourselves. So then I kept digging and digging. And what I discovered, I'm thrilled to share this with you. I love how you take in ideas, is that there's this thing that we call the change arc. And it's how individual people go through change. So when a change comes at you, the first stage of it we call proposed change. And it's you want to know some stuff. And the things you want to know are really predictable. You want to know, what does this mean for me? Right? Literally, what is going to be changing for me? That's the first thing. And the second thing you want to know is why? Why is it changing? And the why, you want it to be personally meaningful. Like if it's changing for some reason I don't care about, then I don't care. Why is it changing? And then the third thing, and this is really important, what will it look like when the change has been made? Because one of the pieces of research I found during the writing of the book was that a lot of neuropsychologists now believe that our deepest fear is fear of the unknown. So it's really important for us. It's like, what is it going to look like? Otherwise, it feels mentally like you're just walking into a dark alley at night. Like, okay, you're saying this is going to change. What's on the other side, right? So we try to collect that information. Then, and this is kind of the heart of it, we call it mindset shift. It's the top of the arc. Because of this homeostasis urge and us saying change is dangerous, our mindset about most change, most of the time, our entering mindset is that it's going to be difficult, costly, and weird. And difficult means I don't know how to do it, and other people are going to get in the way of me doing it. Costly means it will take away things I value. And that might be time or resources, but it's just as likely to be identity or reputation or relationships or power, right? If I make this change, I'll have to be different in ways that will be less valuable. And weird just means strange and unnatural. So what we then saw is that when people actually make a change, what happens is their mindset shifts and they start to believe that the change could be easy versus difficult, or at least doable, rewarding versus costly, that it will give me more than it will take away, and normal. And normal means people like me do it. I look around and the people I think of as being like me, they're doing it. Okay, that's a little less scary. And almost more important, people I admire and want to emulate are doing it, which is why it's so important for leaders to model a change that they're wanting people to do. So I know we saw that once people's mindset starts to shift into, oh, it could be easy, it could be rewarding, it could be normal, then people are open to doing the new behaviors, behaving in the ways that the change requires, and the change can occur. So that's really the premise at the heart of the book, that when an individual goes through that arc, they can make a change. They will make a change. They're willing to make a change. And then the rest of the book, I talk about our 5-step change model that we use to help organizations through change. And what that change model is really is a cascading of that change arc through a whole organization while you're executing the nuts and bolts aspects of the change. And it's the only model that I know of that integrates those two things. Most change models are just, how do you do the change itself well? And they kind of, maybe they do a lick and a promise on the human side, but they don't really integrate those two things.
Yeah, I think that's true. I mean, I've been through a lot of those models myself, having been in corporate America for a while and
Yeah.
coached and trained folks. But it's interesting to have both. And I like the first, I really like the reminder of the why, right? Like, and I would tell you that, the research I've done myself, right, is that, this generation that's really the up and coming leaders, they're not generation Y, the letter Y, but they're generation ask why, like find
That's
out
great.
why.
That's great.
Right.
Yeah.
So that's helpful for them, especially. And then I think once we can get that moving, your 3 points are right on, right? If we can make this feel easy, oh, this
Yes.
isn't so bad, I can do this. It's
Yes.
going to reward us, right? I'm going to see a benefit from this. And then I love the fact that we can find a normal, that it's not weird and uncomfortable. Because I'm used to being weird. I mean, that's me, right? I'm weird, but most people are not. Most people are like, oh, that's weird, that's scary, that's uncomfortable, that's
Yes.
awkward. So
Yeah.
let's start with easy first. And because change is not easy. It might be
Yeah.
simple, but it's not easy. So how do we tee that up, Erica? How do we get there?
Well, so the first thing is, since this is a mindset based shift, is to attend to people's, in effect, self talk, how people are talking to themselves. And what we prescribe when we work with people, and what I prescribe in the book is, the thing when you're in a plane, they say, put on your own mask before attempting to help others. So what we say is, okay, leaders, first, you're going to have to get clear about your own mindset and make that shift. So it's first how you talk to yourself. So let's talk about that with easy. So let's say that I'm the leader of an accounts payable group in a corporation, right? And the word comes down to me, change gets imposed on me, that we are going to institute a whole new invoicing and payment system. And because change is dangerous, my first self-talk is likely to be, oh my God, this is going to be such a pain in the neck. Oh, so that's difficult, right? Oh, it's going to take so much time. And when we're already so busy, costly. And I've never seen anything like this. And the one I like the one we have. Weird, right? We talk to ourselves about that. So then as a leader, our first responsibility is to figure out accurate but hopeful ways to talk to ourselves differently. So you might say, okay, all right. I bet there's going to be some training on it. And it sounds like my boss is really into this. So she's going to remove some impediments. So easy, or at least doable, right? She's saying that it's going to be, once we get it up and running, it's going to be a lot quicker. And the clients are actually going to like it better, rewarding versus costly. And, my boss, I have a lot of faith in my boss, and she seems to like this. And Joe over here, who's my friend, he's kind of enthusiastic about it. Normal, right? So as leaders, we can and have to manage our self-talk about change to put it so that we're more hopeful and more open versus this is going to be horrible, right? So that's the first thing. And then this, once you've done that, then you can start to help your people do that too, by helping them. Well, how could we think about it? How could this be easier? And also by making it easier, by making sure that they have the tools and the processes and the training that they're going to need, and that they know that, right?
Yeah, for sure. So that starts with a lot of trust, right? We have to trust that our leaders are going to do the right things for us, not just for the organization and for our customers. And again, not
Yes.
just for the organization. So how do we demonstrate that? Maybe if we have a new leader that now, 3 months in role and she's got now, oh boy, changed and imposed. How
Yes.
do how do we process that? How do we make sure that we have the trust so that we can go into those wonderful, that hopeful but accurate
Yes. Yes.
self-talk?
Man, you ask such great questions. You have always asked such great questions. So there's
Thank you.
something that we developed and that we recommend, which I'll share with you, and we call them change levers. Levers in the sense, you know how levers and pulleys are force multipliers. So we
Yeah.
found that there are 4 ways to frame your communication that does increase that trust and helps people move through the change arc. The first one is increase understanding. I can't tell you how many times I've seen organizational changes where people just are in the dark. They don't have context, they don't have rationale, they don't know where this came from. They're not getting that. What is it? Why is it happening? What is the future going to look like? They're not getting any of that contextual understanding. So that's the very first thing, to be transparent and to increase people's understanding about the change. That's thing one. The second lever is clarify and reinforce priorities. Because a lot what happens in change is people just assume that everything is, it's 52 pickup, everything's up for grabs, nothing's the same. And so if you can say to them, no, those 5 priorities that you had before, 4 of them are exactly the same, and the 5th one is somewhat changed by this change. That's hugely soothing to people. And often leaders don't never say that out loud, and so people keep assuming the worst, right? So that's thing 2. Thing 3, and this one I would venture to say is maybe the most important, is give control. Because people feel, to be blunt, victimized by change. It's coming at me. I'm at the effect of it. I don't have any control. So if you as the leader can figure out how to give people more control in the change, how things will happen, when they'll happen, how they communicate to their people, whether or not they're on the team, to, any choices, any decisions you can put back to them is going to help them feel more in control and be more engaged. And then the last one is give support. And at the beginning, and this is, how much listening increases trust, right? So at the beginning of a change, the most important support you can give is listen to people, because they're going to be saying things about how they think it's difficult and costly and weird. So if you as a leader can really listen deeply to that, not try and talk them out of it, not try and reassure them, but just, oh, you're worried about that you're not going to know how to do this. Yes, I can see why that's a concern. Full stop. Now, let's figure out how, because once you've listened to them, then you can give the support of offering tools, offering training, offering insight, whatever more they need. But the first most important thing in giving support is to listen to people.
Absolutely. Yeah. Listening matters. I would say listening matters throughout, right? To increase the
Oh,
understanding what's wrong, what's your concerns, and then shut your mouth as a leader and listen. And then to your
absolutely.
point about priorities, right? Hey, so I'm worried that everything has changed. Well, hold on. Let's talk about that.
Yes,
Here's what we
exactly.
have, right? We get that clarity. And then the
Yeah.
control is that's probably the hardest one, to your point though. I
Yes.
think, to give our team control. But if we can just determine how they disseminate the information and when and help them with that, the
Yeah.
information might be the same. But how they deliver it, some
Absolutely.
teams, right?
And you're absolutely right that leaders, that's the first place they push back, is because lots of times leaders don't feel like they have control. They've gotten the change from on high, and now they just have to pass it on. So we have to help them see a little more deeply. It's like, okay, this is going to imply lots of decisions, lots of actions. How can you give them control? How can you give them choices? And there are almost always choices that you can give, which just makes people feel so much better.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, any little change, if you give people the choice, actually can be super empowering, and that support in that, hey, it might be, it might be a little weird for a little while, right? That
Yes.
hopeful, right? I
Yeah.
think your point about accurate but hopeful in that support is important, right? We don't want to commiserate. Oh my gosh, you're right. This is going to be horrible, but no, I understand your concern, and here's how we're going to move through that. I think is that's really awesome advice,
That's
Eric.
exactly
I
right.
love
And
that.
I love the distinction you just made, which is a very important one. The distinction between agreeing and hearing. So somebody says, "Oh, this is going to be terrible. This will just take months," and you can say, "Wow, you're really worried about how complex this is going to be and how much time it's going to take." That's just hearing. I'm not agreeing with you. I'm just taking it in. And then I can say, "Okay." And you can even then say, and they go, "Yes." And you can say, "I have a different point of view because I have some more information. Can I share that with you?" And that feels so different than just starting right in going, "No, that's not right."
Yeah, well, and that having more information, I think, is often the key to actually helping things stick, because as we
Yes.
go, we can't jam. I mean, the change is not like a blanket we just throw over their head. Change
Right.
is more. We have to wrap them gently with it and make sure that it fits each person on the team, because everybody wants support differently. And I really, I think those are very, very strong, and that change arc helps a ton. So let's talk a little bit about how we have to lead this transition, because I know listening is certainly part of the leading part, but a lot of times as leaders, we just, to your point, we homeostasis us, we go
Yeah.
back to working on what we had there. So how do
Yeah.
we get out front of that and actually lead the change so that we can get to the point where we can keep it going?
Okay, so this is where I want to introduce this 5-step model that we have, because I feel like it's great for leaders to have a frame. And the frame really accords with the change arc. As I said, it's a way to cascade the change arc through the organization. So, generally speaking, a change starts in the minds of a few people, right? Sometimes it's the senior team. Sometimes, like if you were going to, let's say there's a manufacturing company and they need to change the production process for their core, thing that they make, their core product. Um, that idea might start. Let's say there's a woman who's head of production. The idea for that change might start in her head, right? So then let's say she thinks about it for a while. She thinks about how it might work and why it's important and what it'll look like. She goes to the senior team, and the CEO goes, "Yeah, I think that's a great idea." So that's kind of where the change starts. And the first step in our model is very much aligned with the change arc, is clarify the change and why it's needed. So that small group, both for their benefit and subsequently for the benefit of the whole organization, has to get really clear on what exactly are we talking about changing and why. And they need to think, you and I talked about this a few minutes ago, they need to think about the why, not just from their point of view, but from the point, something that's going to be compelling for the organization. And the example that I often give is when senior leaders are talking about a change, their why is often about profitability. If we make this change, the business will be more profitable. So somebody on the production line who's going to make $17 an hour, whether or not you make this change, that is unlikely to be compelling for them. But if you can say, it will make the process simpler, or you'll have more time to work on those higher end custom projects that you like, those might be compelling, or you'll have more of a chance to collaboration with the people in quality who you like. So the senior team then has to think about the why in a way that's compelling. That's kind of an elevator pitch for the organization. So that's step one. Step two is them then further thinking about, okay, let's create a vision. what if we make this change successfully, what will the organization look and feel and sound like? And a vision, as you know, isn't just goals or financial modeling. It's a description of a hoped for future, right? So that this core team thinks about really what will it look like? What are the benefits? How will we be different as an organization if we make this change, right? So those are the first two steps. And then you start to cascade it, because the third step is you're bringing together a change team. If it's not this senior team, which it's usually not, you're bringing together a change team that's going to design the change and the transition plan and then be responsible for managing it through the organization. So you're bringing that team together. And then you're also identifying any other stakeholders, people who aren't either on the senior team or the change team, but whose support is necessary for the change. And the great thing is, the senior team, you've already defined those proposed change things that people want to know and started to go through your own mindset shift, so that when you turn to the change team and the stakeholders, you have the means to start helping them through their change arc, right? So you bring the change team on correctly, you engage the stakeholders, then you create the actual nuts and bolts change plan, work streams, the whole thing, this. And you start thinking about the transition plan. The terms we use, change plan is the nuts and bolts, practical, what's changing. The transition plan is how do you help people through that? What we've been talking about, the human side. So then that's the fourth step, is you think about what parts of the organization are going to be most affected by the change. What are those effects going to be? What's kind of ending and beginning for them? Then you craft a transition plan that will use those 4 levers we talked about to help them through their change arc as the change is being implemented. And then you execute the change and the transition plans together. So at that point, it's cascaded to the whole organization. And if you do yourself right, you're instituting the change while you're helping them all through their change arc. And then the 5th step is about adoption and monitoring. You make sure that you're looking at it to see that it really worked, that it's being adopted, and you look to make your organization itself more change capable, by which I mean, if you see any organizational impediments to change itself, which most of our organizations have, you work on removing those, so this change and any future change can happen better.
Wow. That's great. I mean, there's so much there. I can see why you'd get curious about this, because if we can simplify this, often change is easier for all of us if we see some commonality, some common threads here. And I'll tell you, I've never been through these steps other than by reading your book. I mean, I've never seen them, right? I transition, change. No, it's like, suck it up, buttercup. We're doing this different.
Oh,
and I'll tell you, right? We see
absolutely.
so much resistance then.
Oh my gosh. And I note this in the book at one point. I was working with a CEO, this was many years ago, and we were just starting to evolve this. And it was a huge change. His company was merging / being acquired by another company. And, they had the due diligence. They knew what they wanted to have the results be financially, all this very nuts and bolts stuff. And I said, well, how are you helping your people through this? And he literally said to me, oh, they're good. They'll get with the program. Literally, that was his transition plan, and they lost a lot of their best people, and the financial results they were looking for took 3 years instead of a year. I mean, you ignore this stuff at your peril.
Yeah, wow. So I think of some organizations that I've been part of that are all about M&A, and they never communicate this stuff. They just, to your point, right? They'll deal. It'll be fine. What?
Yes.
No, they won't. They
No,
won't be
they
fine.
won't.
And your people are your best resource. Like, if we think of, and I hate to say it, but they really are, right? We have the ability here to do better for people. And hopefully, right, when people read Change from the Inside Out, now that they know better, hopefully they do better. And they see that. So give me maybe one more impediment here to making this happen, Erika. Why would an organization not use this model to do that? Obviously, if they don't know about it, they wouldn't. But I mean, why else would they not want to change from the inside out and have these helpful plans instead of competing plans?
So it was a great question, and I've thought about it a lot. And I think one thing that happens that makes it harder for leaders to do this well is, okay, so I described that 5-step model where leaders find out about it early on, And then in the third step, they bring some more people into the tent. In the fourth step, they bring everybody in. So what I've seen happen, and remember, people, an individual person starts going through their change arc at the moment they hear about the plan. So if they don't hear about the change until step 3 or step 4, that's when they start going through their mindset shift. So what happens is leaders hear about it in step 1. They go through their own, oh, this is going to be difficult and costly. And we're okay, I guess it could be, so they go through their mindset shift. They start thinking about the new behaviors. It takes weeks or months. They go through their process. And then what often happens is they turn to their people and say, here's the change. And they expect their people to be where they themselves are after 3 months of thinking about the change. And then when they're not, of course, when as human beings, they're starting at the beginning, they're going through their change arc, then the leaders start going, oh, you're so change resistant and you're so negative and you're so backward looking. It's like, dude, they're going through precisely what you went through a month or 2 months or 3 months ago, right? So I think that's what happens is leaders literally forget what they've gone through, and then they have unrealistic expectations of their people.
Yeah. Well, yeah. I mean, if you've had 3 months to handle a decision and somebody else has had 3 minutes, you can't expect them to be at the same spot. Wow. That's so good. Wow. So what was the most surprising thing that you learned from the book? Was there any like big aha that you can share with us that was like, oh my gosh, I didn't expect this? Or was there something that really you're like, oh yeah, I knew this was going to happen. And this was not an aha, but it came through even stronger as a core lesson?
Oh man, what a great question. So I think the happiest surprise was, I went through all this thinking and got to this homeostasis problem and then kind of invented the change arc. And it's like, oh, okay, I think this is right. And everybody I bounced it off was like, yes, that's how I go through change. And then I turned to our change model, which we already had. My colleagues, Jeff and Carrie, had invented it about 10 years ago. And I guess, maybe great minds think alike. I noticed that our change model was absolutely set up to cascade people through the change arc, that the first 2 steps of the change model were proposed change. It's what people first need to know. And then the way we had set up steps 3 and 4 with the transition plan was to help people through the arc. So there was a wonderful consonance that made things really easy. And I suspect that's why our change work has been so successful, because they were lined up without even knowing what that core of the change arc was. So that's the happy surprise. The unhappy surprise has been exactly what you say. It's just sad and astonishing to me that there's so little attention to the human side, and that the few models that do focus on the human side kind of only focus on the human side, that there's not that integration. So I hope and believe that we're doing kind of a service to humanity by integrating the two.
Yeah, I think so. Well, it's a great book, Erika. Congratulations. I mean, you've got a nice website set up for it at changefromtheinside.com, which I dig. And, all of your books are fantastic. So if you're going to help us take away one more thing or drive one more point home that'll help us get started on this change, how can we get started?
I love that. So the core of the core of the core is managing your self-talk about change. So for those of you who are listening who haven't thought about this before, that you can actually think about how you think and change it, this is such a powerful skill, and it's critically important in change because, as I said, we're wired to think about change mostly negatively. I mean, some people are very change fluent and have already sorted this out, but most of us know when change comes at us, we're like, oh, it's going to be difficult and costly and weird. So knowing that you can actually reflect on, recognize what you're saying to yourself and shift it to be more accurate and more hopeful, that's super powerful.
Awesome. Accuracy and hopefulness, 2 things that we can all strive to do. I love it, Erika. Congratulations once again. Change from the Inside. Folks, if you're looking to get this book and want to make change actually work, marry up the individual and the corporate needs here, you have an opportunity. Pick up the book. It's fantastic. Erika, as always, I enjoy talking to you. I always learn so much, and another wonderful book. Congratulations. Thank you for sharing it with me.
Thank you so much, Phil. It's been wonderful to talk to you.
You too, my friend. Take care.